What the hell is going on? Seriously, why do we have all of this happening in such a short time frame? Maybe has something to do with contracts that I don't fully understand, but I mean, we're looking at Calvin Ridley going out there, having himself a day, gambling. Obviously, that changes a couple of our evaluations. Then directly after that, you got Aaron Rodgers signing. Then you have Russell Wilson getting traded. Then you have Mike Williams with the extension. And now Carson Wentz going over to Washington. And I probably forgot something, but it is what it is. We're going to be talking about Carson Wentz going over to the Washington Commanders. As gross as that sounds, going to be diving into exactly what it means for players like Terry McLaurin, for someone like Antonio Gibson. But you know what I got to ask? If somehow you are new to the channel, go down there and subscribe, but only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And also make sure you drop a like on this live stream. Leave a comment letting me know your thoughts on this trade. And I mean, we've had, I want to say maybe 200 comments on the Russell Wilson trade. A lot of y'all telling me where you think DK Metcalf should be ranked now. And I mean, honestly, I really enjoy reading those comments. And I have updated our locals rankings with that trade, of course. But we got some people in the chat saying it is Terry McLaurin's season. I understand that's going to be the initial reaction for a lot of people. And real quick, let me pull up the quarterbacks that Terry McLaurin has played for, because it is laughable. Now, God, hopefully this is how you search it. Washington Commanders stats, even though they've never really been the Commanders. I'm going to say Washington football team stats. Okay, so if we're pulling these up, in 2020, the leading passer for the Washington football team at this time was Taylor Heineke. Taylor Heineke goes out there, and y'all know my favorite statistic when evaluating these quarterbacks is looking at adjusted yards per pass attempt. Of course, so much more goes into quarterback play than this. I understand we're just scratching the surface, but I'm never going to be the guy coming out here and trying to sell myself as some expert quarterback scout, because as I've always said, if someone's trying to come and make a YouTube video and tell you that they can successfully scout NFL quarterbacks, it's the hardest job on the planet. Like, let's not fool ourselves. I mean, we have seen time and time again, I'm literally writing a dynasty research book, spent hundreds of hours researching for this, and I've proven that the NFL is better at evaluating these quarterbacks than dynasty players, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think we can say it's a safe spot to be, to just look at adjusted yards per attempt and say this is a baseline for the quarterback play that Terry McLaurin's had. And you got 6.4 for the adjusted yards per attempt for Taylor Heineke. Pretty damn bad. With Taylor Heineke, 15 interceptions, 20 passing touchdowns. I mean, this is a quarterback that had 213 passing yards on a per game basis. So, of course, it's going to be very hard to produce if you're Terry McLaurin in that offense. And I know that Fitzmagic was supposed to be the quarterback going into the season, but that's why I hated Terry McLaurin last offseason, if y'all remember, with that dynasty value. And if we go back to 2020, this is why I needed to pull it up. Of course, Heineke was the starting quarterback last year, but in 2020, we had a rotation of players. You had Alex Smith, who played for 8 games. Alex Smith, I mean, going out there, 197 passing yards a game, 6 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 6.3 for his adjusted yards per pass attempt. You had Dwayne Haskins playing half the season. Dwayne Haskins started 6 games. With Dwayne Haskins going out there, 5 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 205 passing yards on a per game basis. And, I mean, an abysmal 5.1 adjusted yards per pass attempt. Kyle Allen was the best starting quarterback that Washington had this year for a span of 4 games. That is kind of what Terry McLaurin has been dealing with, to the perfect example that over the past 3 years, his best starting quarterback, I mean, you could make the argument, has been Kyle Allen. I mean, you did have Case Keenum with a 6.9 adjusted yards per pass attempt the previous season in 2019. You had Dwayne Haskins playing half the year as well. Dwayne Haskins looked absolutely horrible. So Terry McLaurin has dealt with possibly one of the worst quarterback situations in fantasy football over the past 3 years. And I know a lot of people want to give Terry McLaurin a lot of credit for doing so. Now, I will always be the first person to rain on the Terry McLaurin parade to be the wet blanket with this scenario, because just like Courtland Sutton back in 2019, I think people have a very difficult time in evaluating Terry McLaurin, the fantasy asset, versus the real life wide receiver. From a real life perspective, we can all agree Terry McLaurin is a damn good receiver overall. Terry McLaurin has been, a player that probably goes on the mark of best value wide receivers from an NFL draft perspective over the past 5 years, going in the third round to Washington. But if we are looking at where his fantasy production has been, Terry McLaurin this past year, wide receiver 33 on a points per game basis. So a low end wide receiver 3, high end wide receiver 4, depending on if you're playing in a 10 or a 12 team league. Now, Terry McLaurin, the year before this, wide receiver 21 on a per game basis. So low end wide receiver 2. And in 2019 with Terry McLaurin here, he was the wide receiver 29. So a mid wide receiver 3. So Terry McLaurin, really his best year so far through the first 3 years in his NFL career has been that low end wide receiver 2. So I really don't want people to say, oh, Terry McLaurin, he's been a wide receiver 1 with Heineke. Let's go all in. No, McLaurin, you're already expecting a massive jump up from really any quarterback play, regardless if we're looking historically with where his production has been. Now, if we're also going to be talking about Terry McLaurin's age, I know Terry McLaurin drafted in 2019, drafted in the same class as DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Hollywood Brown, Deebo Samuel. Seems like Terry McLaurin, should be very similar to DK Metcalf. Is he 23, 24 years old? Terry McLaurin's going to be 27 this upcoming season. The reason for this, he went to Ohio State. We stayed there all 5 years, never really able to get on the field, but it's because Urban Meyer was there and they had a very weird scheme for their wide receivers. Just really pigeonholing them into very specific roles. So I don't want to hold that against Terry McLaurin. Obviously, that was so long ago. But Terry McLaurin's a 27-year-old wide receiver. Don't think you're drafting him for the next 5 years. Don't think he's a cornerstone asset for you like an AJ Brown is with his age. Okay? So let's get those out of the way and let's try to accurately rank Terry McLaurin going forward in Dynasty. Let me pull up my current Dynasty rankings, kind of just take a quick peek of where we have him. I know we have him in the same tier as Devonta Smith. I don't know what number that is officially. I have Terry McLaurin wide receiver 19. And I know a lot of people are going to get upset with me with this ranking, but I want to say a couple things. A, before this trade, a Terry McLaurin hater on many notes, I've already had Terry McLaurin. He'll be a 27-year-old wide receiver this upcoming season, ranked higher in Dynasty than he has ever finished on a per-game basis so far his NFL career. Now, I understand some of the worst quarterback play you're ever going to find, and that's why I'm willing to rank a 27-year-old wide receiver higher than he's ever finished. That's why I'm already willing to take that pretty big leap with his projections. But if we can talk about how high Terry McLaurin moves from here, let me discuss the receivers that are ranked ahead of Terry McLaurin right now in my rankings. The tier above, we have, I probably need to still have DK Metcalf over Godwin. Let's put Metcalf at 14. We have DK Metcalf at 14, Chris Godwin 15, Treylon Burks 16, Garrett Wilson 17, Drake London 18. If I were to move Terry McLaurin any higher in our current set of rankings, can I reasonably move him up over those elite wide receiver prospects that are going to be 21 years old this upcoming season? I have a very hard time doing so. Now, one thing that I really want to address is the price point Washington paid for Carson Wentz and what it may tell us for how the NFL valued Carson Wentz this offseason. If you look at it, let me pull up my text from JN. Thank you, JN. I was actually writing for our Dynasty research book as JN sent me this text, kind of broke the news to us. The trade terms, the Colts are getting a third-round pick, an additional third-round pick in 2023 if Carson Wentz plays 70% of the offensive snaps for Washington this upcoming season, and a second-round pick swap. So essentially, if you're looking at this, the price for Carson Wentz was a third-round pick. A third-round pick. And the possibility to get an additional third dependent on if Carson Wentz can play 70% of the snaps. That tells us how the Indianapolis Colts viewed Carson Wentz. Now, of course, they're mainly just trying to get the contract off their books. Of course, you have to pay Carson Wentz a ridiculous amount of money. But now we look at the situation that Indianapolis is in. How are they reasonably going to just fix their quarterback situation like this? Are they in play to go get someone like Jimmy Garoppolo? Are they going, full on tank mode? Let me pull up Tankathon real quick to see exactly where Indianapolis picks in this year's draft. So you have Indianapolis. I forgot they traded their first round selection to Philadelphia. So Indy doesn't even have a first round pick in this year's draft. What does that tell us about Carson Wentz? I know he has the big contract to go along with it. I know there's more to this deal than just the third round selection. But I don't necessarily think that Carson Wentz is a drastic upgrade compared to what Washington would have got otherwise. Because when I'm sitting here, previously ranking Terry McLaurin as our wide receiver 19 in Dynasty, directly behind Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, and Drake London, I am doing so with the expectation that Washington makes a move this offseason. I'm doing so with the expectation that they go out there and draft Kenny Pickett, draft Matt Corral, draft Malik Willis in the first round, or they go out there and trade a second round pick to go get Jimmy Garoppolo. So with our expectations that Washington wasn't going to be starting Taylor Heineke this upcoming year, I think a lot of people are going to view Carson Wentz as an apparent upgrade, where in reality, it shouldn't be. Because we knew that they were going to have to make a play at quarterback somehow. This isn't a Denver Broncos situation where they go out there and they're able to bring in Russell Wilson. So while a lot of people are going to get very excited about this trade for Washington, I want to say, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Because I don't want to say Carson Wentz was the worst option they could have brought in this offseason, but about average. This was almost expectation. It wasn't the exact name that we're thinking of. But if we're looking at Carson Wentz, and of course, there's way more to this than just adjusted yards per pass attempt. An impressive 7.3 this past year. But as we've already discussed, I know JN's in the chat right now talking about, oh, we got Sam Ehlinger going, and Sam Ehlinger is going to take over for Indianapolis. I would be willing to bet any amount of money on the under at 8 games started for Sam Ehlinger this upcoming season. And a lot of y'all know in the chat right now, I graduated from the University of Texas. I literally went to school with Sam Ehlinger my entire 4 years at UT. I watched him play. He was our starting quarterback. I rooted for the guy literally every single year. I would see him walking around campus. I probably saw him walking around campus 15 times. Like, trust me, if there's anybody out here that's going to be trying to go Sam Ehlinger, Sam Ehlinger, Sam Ehlinger, it would be me. But in reality, that's not something we can do. He's a day 3 drafted NFL quarterback. If you look at historical hit rates from those guys, they simply never start at the NFL. This is someone that was drafted to be a backup. Of course, you can find exceptions to the rule. You can find the Russell Wilson, the Dak Prescott, and the Tom Brady. But if you're looking at just the hit rates that you have from those players, you're grabbing at straws through decades of NFL draft classes where you have 15 guys going in that range. So I would be very surprised if Sam Ehlinger is the answer for Indianapolis. I think that Indy still has a move to make that I don't fully understand, but it is what it is. Now, let me go over and look at Antonio Gibson. And one thing that we can talk about is the distribution that you had for running back targets in Indianapolis this past season. And with Carson Wentz, you'd imagine that in Indianapolis, he was checking the ball down to the running back position quite often. I would if I were him. Your receiver core is Michael Pittman, and who else beyond that? Zach Pascal was the second leading receiver on Indianapolis. So if you drop back to pass and you're like, oh, Michael Pittman, double. Should I force it into Zach Pascal, or should I just dump it down? We got the best running back in the NFL in Jonathan Taylor. We have a great pass-catching running back as well in Nyheim Hines. We don't really have a tight end outside of Mo Alley Cox. You would imagine that with the personnel Carson Wentz had in Indianapolis this past year, also Carson Wentz not necessarily super mobile at this point in his own NFL career. It's not like he's all of a sudden going out there and rushing for 300, 400 yards as he was able to do at the very beginning of his career. He only had 57 rushing yards this season. Like, it's not like he's the Lamar Jackson quarterback where he can't go away from the dump off by scrambling. you would assume that you just have a ridiculous amount of targets flooding towards Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. Where in reality, Nyheim Hines sees 57 targets this season. Now, that was through 17 games. And if we go and check out, Nyheim Hines with his targets, that was the most games he's ever played in his NFL career and the fewest amount of targets that he had ever seen in any NFL season, including his rookie year. Now, of course, that's going to be very skewed when you have Jonathan Taylor playing alongside you, because Jonathan Taylor is going to be dominating snaps. Jonathan Taylor is going to be dominating pretty much every single touch in that backfield. But still, you get the drop off in targets for Nyheim Hines. Jonathan Taylor himself gets about 51 targets. I know it would be easy for people to come out and say, okay, well, let me get my calculator. Let's add 57 and 51. Okay, that's 108. Antonio Gibson, 108 targets this upcoming season. It's not going to work like that. I would be very surprised if Antonio Gibson all of a sudden became an elite pass-catching running back despite being a former receiver at Memphis. I don't think this is that good of a move for really anybody in Washington. I know it's definitely an upgrade over Heineke, but they were going to upgrade to someone no matter what. The price indicates that, really no NFL team. Think about all the NFL teams that could have used a quarterback. None of them were willing to go out there and pay up for one. I think this makes it a lot more likely that they use their first-round selection to bring in a second wide receiver, such as Garrett Wilson, rather than actually going and spending that pick on Malik Willis now in Washington. I would be on the lookout to see what happens in Indianapolis, because I'd be very surprised if all of a sudden Sam Ehlinger is the starting quarterback. But it is what it is. And we got some people telling me we have no sound in the chat, so I guess maybe... Or no, we just got one person saying that. Okay, so I think that should be the main breakdown. Of course, all our rankings are going to be updated over there on Locals later today. I've already updated all the rankings for the Denver guys, and I meant to get you all the video out today, where last night I recorded a video. I dove in depth on expectations for Courtland Sutton, for Jerry Jeudy, for Noah Fant going forward, for DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and I was an idiot. I accidentally didn't upload the file to Thomas last night, but I got it to him this morning. Thomas said he will have that edited for y'all, and we'll be able to get that video out tomorrow morning. Outside of that, I don't really think this move has that many lasting impacts. Move Michael Pittman down slightly if they don't make a move at quarterback, but they will. I would be very interested to know your opinion on where Indianapolis goes from here, because I promise you they're not starting Sam Ehlinger. So what quarterback are they targeting? Let me just dive in, I guess, because the thing is, I don't know if they can get one in the NFL draft. They would legitimately have to trade up. So they have to make a trade from here. They either trade into the first round, find a quarterback that way. They either trade for a quarterback elsewhere, options that they could potentially pursue. Not Watson. That's in division. Of course, that's not going to happen. You could have Jimmy Garoppolo, Jameis Winston. Is there anybody else I'm missing? Yeah, Brendan Fish says Deshaun Watson. I would say Watson, but the thing is that the Texans aren't going to be trading Deshaun Watson in division. I think they'll trade him in the same conference. They're not going to trade him in division, though. Like, if we go team by team, just kind of, I was going to say Matt Ryan, but that'd be very surprising if they actually go for Matt Ryan. There would be no reason for that. They'd be paying Matt Ryan more money than they were paying Carson Wentz, or very similar to the same amount. So, you're really going to try to upgrade a third-round pick? I don't think there's much of an explanation there. Okay, so Pickle says Derek Carr or Jordan Love. Interesting. I don't want to say Love is like, I guess Jordan Love could be a possibility. It would make sense with the timing of the Aaron Rodgers extension. Jacoby Brisket not coming in. Dalton. Trubisky. I think Trubisky, Derek Carr, Jordan Love, Jimmy Garoppolo. I think those would be my guesses. But of course, I'm just guessing. Do y'all think I'm being too harsh saying this doesn't help Terry McLaurin? Just because I know, that's going to be everybody's initial reaction. Everybody's initial reaction is going to be saying, oh, bump up Terry McLaurin. He finally has a quarterback. But he was going to get a quarterback regardless. They weren't going into this season with Taylor Heineke. They were going to take someone at 11 if they didn't go out there and trade for someone like Wentz or Jimmy Garoppolo. And like I said, I was already ranking Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 19. I'm currently ranking Antonio Gibson as running back 10. I don't think I'm moving up either player based on the trade, because the expectation was for them to go out there and get a quarterback, which they did. This wasn't one of the best options they could have had. If anything, it was about an average option. Thomas says Darnold. I could see Darnold as well. Donald says, no, I love Terry McLaurin, but I agree. Okay, thank you. Hopefully, not too many people are upset with me saying that, because I understand that a lot of people are going to get excited. But I mean, literally, if I want to move him up in my rankings, I'm not putting Terry McLaurin ahead of Drake London, because let's say at 11, Washington decides to take Drake London, a 21-year-old wide receiver coming in, has the elite profile. I don't want to compare them as prospects, because of course, when Terry McLaurin's 27 years old, his prospect profile doesn't matter anymore, but I'd imagine the target shares would be similar between the two receivers. And if you're going to be able to get that option at 21, that still has the potential to have that jump up into the elite range. Give me someone like Drake London, Garrett Wilson, or Treylon Burks if they land in Washington. Of course, from a redraft perspective, you prefer McLaurin, but we're talking dynasty here. Dylan says Winston. Ben says Kirk Cousins. I think Cousins is going to be safe in Minnesota whenever they decided to go with Cousins instead of the coach. Pickle says maybe Bridgewater. Swizz World says maybe Baker. I actually like that call. I think the Baker call is actually a good one. Sam says Baker. I love that. Baker to the Colts. I'm with y'all. I think the possibilities for the Colts, Baker, Winston, Jimmy G, and this is in no particular order, Jordan Love. You know what? Maybe Derek Carr. Derek Carr could be a good call. I saw someone say this in the chat earlier, and I honestly just ignored it. But if you think through it, if you're sitting there and you're the Raiders general manager and the Denver Broncos just traded for Russell Wilson, and you're looking at 6 games in your schedule guaranteed where you're going up against Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, and you're looking at Derek Carr, you're going, why are we going to keep you just so we can finish last in the division and not even get a top 5 NFL draft pick? Probably would make sense if you were the Las Vegas Raiders to just completely burn it down, start a rebuild, pray that something changes in the division when it probably isn't going to. I think that'd be very interesting. But of course, thank you all so much for watching the video. As I said, we got 250 people watching this right now. If we could please get this live stream, all I ask for, 100 likes. Half of y'all go down there, drop a like on the live stream, help us out so much. Leave a comment after this stream is over with whatever thoughts you had about the move. If you think I'm being a little bit too harsh, not moving Terry McLaurin up our rankings, not moving Antonio Gibson up. But yeah, I think that's all I got for y'all. Again, thank you for being a part of the flock. Hope you have a great day, and hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.